Closely associated with the cult of saints was pilgrimage, the desire to journey often great distances at considerable cost and personal danger, to venerate places of particular holy importance. One of the most famous accounts of such a journey is Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, a group of disparate characters who make their way from Southwark to Canterbury, to the tomb of Thomas of Becket. In his prologue, Chaucer writes, "Then do folk long to go on pilgrimage, and palmers to go seeking out strange strands, to distant shrines well known in sundry lands, and specially from every shire's end of England they to Canterbury wend, the holy blessed martyr there to seek, who helped them when they lay so ill and weak. Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the Tabard, as I lay ready to start upon my pilgrimage to Canterbury, full of devout homage, there came at nightfall to that hostelry some 29 in a company of sundry persons who had chanced to fall in fellowship, and pilgrims were they all, that toward Canterbury town would ride." Pilgrimage speaks to the importance of holy places in medieval Christianity. That one would travel great distances, often at considerable cost and great personal risk, to visit shrines where the remains of the holy saints were to be found, there to find places where intercessory prayers could be made, where healing might be found, or other forms of divine favor, not simply for oneself, but for others, particularly those in purgatory. Pilgrimage was not required as a Christian act, but it was hugely popular in the medieval period. One thinks of great journeys, such as the one undertaken by Chaucer's prioress with that merry band. But for many people, particularly humbler people, pilgrimage could be to a local parish or a neighboring church or shrine. Our Lady of Walsingham in England becomes one of the most significant Marian shrines in England, visited by hundreds of thousands. But there were others in England and across Western Europe. Pilgrimage places could be relatively local, but for others involved great journeys. The supreme place of pilgrimage was Jerusalem, the Holy Land. And medieval literature is full of both literal and allegorical descriptions of the journey to that holy place. But in the wake of the Crusades, the Holy Land was no longer very accessible. Only a very small number of people could manage the journey or were permitted to enter the city of Jerusalem. Pilgrimage, therefore, became something internal within Europe, that people traveled within their own lands or to neighboring lands. But as I say, it was extraordinarily difficult. One risked the danger posed by brigands or all manner of people who sought to fleece you of your goods. One relied on the hospitality, whether of religious houses or of lay people. One had only what one could bring with you. It was a journey undertaken in faith. And that journey was to seek out God's presence in the world in a particular way. Because as we've already said about the saints, their shrines were a kind of intersection of the divine and human, They came together in particular locations, and those locations were associated with particular rewards and benefits, just as the saints were associated with particular gifts and forms of power. In Western Europe in the Middle Ages, Rome, of course, was preeminent as a place of pilgrimage, and hundreds of thousands would make their way to the city. In the Jubilee year of 1300, it's said that over 100,000 were in the city, hoping for indulgences and other spiritual benefit. But Rome was not alone. Canterbury, made famous by Chaucer, after 1220, the shrine of Thomas à Becket. We have in Cologne, the German city on the Rhine, the remains of the three Magi, beautifully kept in a reliquary, which was an object of considerable veneration and the object and place of pilgrimage. Other places of pilgrimage included Santiago de Compostela, still very well known and well traveled in our own day. Here, the church, with its 18th century restoration, were the remains of the Apostle James. And people would travel across Europe to make their way to that shrine. Other places were associated with miracles of a perhaps more unusual type. In Germany, in Wilsnach, in 1383, there was a fire that destroyed the town and the church. Yet miraculously, 3 Eucharists survived. And when these Eucharists were recovered, the hosts, it was discovered that they had bled. This miracle of the bleeding Eucharist became associated with a whole series of stories that brought large numbers of people to the town. And here we see in this woodcut from 1521 an image of the veneration, the celebration of the Mass, with a monstrance on the altar here with the 3 hosts. Pilgrimage took people out of their locality. Most people in medieval Europe did not travel. So pilgrimage was also a form, and one gets this very clearly in Chaucer, of a kind of tourism, an encounter with other places, even other cultures and language, which was an extraordinary event for those who could manage to do it. But it was also closely associated with the act of penance, of putting right what you had done, a charitable act that would help to atone for one's sins. Pilgrimage literature proliferated in the medieval world. It was both devotional, but also had the element of kind of travel material, an exploration, an opening up of Europe. Pilgrimage was central to the whole mentality of medieval Christianity. The journey of the person to the holy place, the encounter with the holy, the intercession, and the receiving of benefits. But it also created communities of faith. Chaucer's story takes us through the whole range of humanity, from the most virtuous to the charlatans. It is a picture of 14th century community. And it is the way in which their journey becomes representative of the whole aspiration of medieval Christianity to move towards those places associated with God's presence in the world.